The American public school system was once the envy of the world. Why don't we take a look at what they're putting into our children's heads nowadays? Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle. Welcome to Moving Back to America. Take a look at this webpage. It's from the LA Unified School District, which is the largest teachers union in the country, I believe. And first thing you see, of course, is all the raised fists of color, I might add. Raised fists everywhere. Nothing better than that for your immediate visual impression of what the LA Unified School District is all about. Black Lives Matter in schools, week of action, not just Black Lives Matter week of action, that's important. Elementary resource, so elementary schools. They, she, he, easy as ABC, fantastic. Exploring gender stereotypes through role plays. It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity. Those are elementary resources, presumably meaning for elementary schools. Let's look at secondary resources. Marsha Pay No Mind Johnson video and Centering Black LGBTQ Students Youth Discussion Prompts. Well, you got to keep those people centered. The First Queer American Hero, William Dorsey Swan. Never heard of him. Transgender and gender non-conforming women of color, says trans-affirming, queer-affirming, and collective value. Collective value, don't forget that part. That's important too. In the immortal words of David Byrne, let me just say, well, how did I get here? This is not my beautiful house. How is it that the webpage for a teachers union looks like the most radical street pamphlet that you could have found anywhere in the country, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly. Certainly. You would look at this and the quality of the webpage and you would just simply kind of think somebody pressed into your hand while they were talking about, UFOs landing and things. And yet, nevertheless, here it is. This is basically the official. It's not really the curriculum, but it's certainly the themes that are going to be promoted all year, of course, but especially during Black History Month. Don't forget the fist. The fist is an important part. So what's going on here? What is this? This is the result of, oh gosh, how long has it been now? It's got to be pushing 100 years. Almost 100 years of thought from an organization called the Frankfurt School. And if you haven't heard of them, we need to do a little brief recap. In the years following World War I, the Marxists of the world, remember the Marxist revolution in Russia occurred in 1918 and pulled Russia out of the war when the Soviets took over, the Bolsheviks took over, mainly when the intellectuals took over. And it was widely perceived at the time that once the Russian Revolution happened, the rest of the world would simply become communist. That's what the science of Karl Marx said. And so after World War I, when the smoke was settling finally, a bunch of Marxists in Germany sat down and took a look at the situation and wondered why things had happened the way they had. Marxist theory had said that communism would come to the industrialized nations of the world. That would be England, France, Germany, United States. But it didn't. It had come to Russia and Russia only. And Russia was backwards and rural and agrarian and all that. And they couldn't make any sense out of it. And they thought about it quite a lot. And they set up a place in Germany called the Institute for Marxism. And it was located in Frankfurt, Germany, and that's why we call it the Frankfurt School. It's really a school of thought, really, more than a physical place. Because after Hitler came to power, parenthetically, the Frankfurt School got up and left. And since they were communists and many of them Jews, they decided it's probably time to get out of Germany. And so they moved to the United States. They moved to Columbia University, just stone's throw away from where Pulitzer Prizes for journalism are being issued. And they stayed here for quite a while. Anyway, these philosophers looked at the world in the 1920s and wondered why the communist revolution didn't happen. And they realized that the reason it didn't happen was because those scoundrel capitalists had created a life that was so filled with material comfort for most of its working class. My God, in the United States, they not only had hot running water, these workers had cars. And it gradually dawned on these big brains that world communism wasn't going to happen, that the standard of living of workers everywhere was rising around the planet. And if the communist revolution never occurred, then there wouldn't be German philosophers and intellectuals put in charge of everything. And that simply wouldn't do. So they decided they had to change their strategy. And basically what the strategy of the Frankfurt School was to say to themselves, look, the communist revolution is not going to come through the workers. It's not going to be the result of an economy. So we have to make it happen through the culture. And the van of the socialist revolution is not going to be the working man, because he's doing pretty well under capitalism. We have to find somebody else who's going to be the champions of this. And the people they selected were the dispossessed, or the victims. So instead of Marxism coming in through the economy via the workers, it would now come in through the culture via the victims. And this gave rise to the two main political weapons that came out of the Frankfurt School. Their offensive weapon, their sword, is called critical theory. And critical theory is the idea that everything that is in the existing culture must be attacked. Irredeemably attacked, constantly attacked on an intellectual basis, but especially on an emotional and a moral basis. All of America had to come under attack. And it had to come under attack from different groups. And the important thing to understand about critical theory is that you could have Black Americans attacking mainstream America as it being racist. You could have homosexuals attacking mainstream America as it being homophobic. You could have women attacking mainstream America and American culture as being misogynist. But the one thing that couldn't happen is they could never attack each other. All the attacks had to come to the center, because the center was where the problem is. And so critical theory divides the country up into tribes. That's basically how it works. Because they understood that e pluribus unum, which is the official motto of the United States, out of many one, no one can defeat that philosophy. The idea that people could come to America, become new people, put all of our old grievances aside to the best of our ability, and go on and lead happy and successful lives, well, that's anathema to the communist and Marxist system. That makes people individuals. We can't have that, because individuals won't be ruled by aging German philosophy professors, or substitute whatever other intellectual you want to put into the place. Now you've got hippies and gray-haired, balding hippies. They want political power. They're not going to get it by becoming university professors, so they're bringing about the revolution. So have all of the dispossessed groups attack the middle, and then that would be the sword. And then they needed a shield. They needed something to defend themselves against the counterattack of the then much stronger mainstream culture. And the shield is called political correctness. And political correctness is the idea that there are certain kinds of speech, or speech about certain subjects, that are off limits. Political correctness is the idea that anything that criticizes our movement of the dispossessed is hate speech and offensive and needs to be silenced. And now you begin to see the mechanism for how these socialists, well, they're communists. It's the Institute for Marxism. I didn't come up with their name, I didn't name them. They named themselves, the Frankfurt School. So now you know the plan and how it works, and now you can see how successful it is, and now this webpage from the Los Angeles Unified School District makes some sense. If the vanguard of the communist revolution is going to be the dispossessed, in other words, the people who have been left out of society, you can reasonably translate that into the revolution will be brought about by the victims of that society. And so the genius of the cult of the victim now, the genius of victim worship begins to be clear. You make the victim the only moral authority in society. And the bigger their victimhood is, the more powerful their moral authority becomes. And furthermore, any criticism of this is instantly portrayed as either racism, misogyny, homophobia, whatever. And because we're decent people, we understand that there's been great injustice done to blacks historically, 150 or more years ago, and up right up until the recent past as well. And it's true that women didn't have equal rights when this country was founded, and all of these things have a fundamental truth to them. But the idea about critical theory is that you have to portray all of these things, number one, as unique to America, You ask most kids coming out of elementary school, who am I kidding, high school or even college, if you ask them about slavery, they'll tell you slavery existed in the American South and nowhere ever before or since. That's what they believe. And whenever the resistance, the counterattack comes, the counter-argument, the rebuttal, knee-jerk that into a category so that it is simply off the table. Well, we don't see enough black students in science. Well, why is that? Because mathematics is racist. Mathematics isn't racist. Don't be ridiculous. Only a racist would defend racist mathematics. And so you see how it goes. And so what we see here on this website basically is the logical conclusion to this, or at least the logical perpetuation of it. Who can be the biggest victim? That's what school is about now. Certainly what school is about in the Los Angeles Unified School District is teaching students how to find their inner victimhood and how to trumpet that louder than anything else, because that is what passes for truth today. It's no longer about telling the truth based on external reality. Now, your social status, your social prestige, your social power, and the degree that teachers consider themselves successful in educating you is predicated on how much of a victim you can make yourself without overstepping the line. And there's a hierarchy. So being a woman is a victim, but being a black person is a greater victim. So a black woman has more victimhood than either of those two. A transgendered black woman has much higher levels of victimhood and therefore much greater moral authority, and you can walk yourself down the line. It's the cult of the victim. It's the worship of the victim. And that is what our education system has become. That's what our politics has become. When Joe Biden talks about things like we're going to administer COVID vaccine along racial guidelines instead of along rational guidelines in terms of the most affected classes, any of the stuff that Mario Cuomo put in place in terms of who gets the vaccine first, and this is just one out of endless examples, then what you're doing is you're basically saying we are going to specially treat the victims. And the reason that we're going to specially treat the victims is because there are warriors. Those are the foot soldiers. That's the vanguard of our movement, are the victims. And if you wonder why so many rich young white kids are talking about being victimized, or even better, you see, because a rich white kid, especially a rich white male student, can never really be a victim. And so the only way that they can gain any kind of status at all is to become super champions of the victimized. That's why you'll see so many white kids talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, and why you'll see most people protesting Black Lives Matter, at least here in Los Angeles. Most of them at the time were white as can be. They don't have their own victimhood status, so they get a bone thrown to them by being advocates for the victims. And the more hysterical and the more fervent they are in defense of their own oppression of other people, the more modest their gains are in terms of their social status. So that's how it works. And when the victim army makes a stand and points out a target, it's like a laser target designator. If one person can then point out how this institution or individual or whatever business is victimizing them and causing them to be unhappy, then that's like a laser target designator. That illuminates the target, and then all the other airstrikes and artillery comes in and destroys the target with social proof and peer pressure. That's how it works. And if you understand how it works, you realize that the entire sham is powered by your own acquiescence to it. In other words, when we look at all of this drivel that is being forced down everybody's throats, and we simply see it happening and spreading everywhere, and we say, how can this be happening? Well, they're not enforcing these rules with machine guns. They don't have hostages. They don't have any means of coercing us into doing it, other than the unbelievably powerful psychological lever of not wanting to be seen as a bad person, of social proof, of peer pressure. The power that is being used to destroy the United States of America is supplied by us. We supply the power. They direct it. And therein lies the problem, and therein lies the solution. If you realize that this whole thing is designed to use your decency, your kindness, and your fundamental fairness as a weapon against you, you have some chance of standing up to it. It's not easy. You have a better idea of what kind of people would come up with a theory like this, what kind of people would pump this into the heads of so many young people, that they've been building this society for 40 years now, actively taking over the schools and promoting this worship of the victim, because the victims are the soldiers in this advance. They're the warriors, which is why the social justice warriors call themselves social justice warriors. They're the first warriors in history who flee the room at the sight of a Swiss Army knife closed on a table. They're absolutely terrified of weapons. They're absolutely terrified of anything that looks like weapons, but they call themselves warriors because they feel that's what they are, and they're being honest about that. They are, in fact, the shock troops. They're the stormtroopers of the worship of victimhood, of the Frankfurt School's ideas of critical theory and political correctness. And they know it. And that's why they're so emboldened. They're emboldened for the same reasons that the brown shirts were emboldened in Nazi Germany. They're emboldened because they feel like they are the fanatical vanguard of a new society that's coming, a much better society, a society that puts them at the forefront instead of at the back of the train, because really successful and happy kids want nothing to do with this. And this is how the slow and the lazy and the weak and the angry and the perpetually outraged control all the rest of us and make all of our lives miserable. That's how it works. That'll do it for this edition of Moving Back to America. It's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. I'm very grateful for our new members, very happy for our old friends who've been here forever. And we'll be back tomorrow morning, Wednesday, with another edition. So until then, we'll see you right here at BillWhittle.com.